My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm 28 years old, and last spring, I died. Well, not really, but the doctors didn't think I'd make it through the night. My parents, Karen and Thomas Bennett, stood by my hospital bed, their faces blank, and told the staff I wasn't their real daughter. They said they owed me nothing and walked away, leaving me to face the dark alone. A week later, they showed up at my grandmother's cottage, ready to claim the inheritance she'd left me, thinking I was gone. But my hospital bed was empty, and all they found was a letter. When they read it, their perfect world unraveled. If you've ever felt abandoned, like you didn't belong, stick with me. This is the story of how I rewrote my ending. I grew up in Cannon Beach, Oregon, a sleepy coastal town where the Pacific Ocean crashes against haystack rocks and the air smells of salt and pine. Our house was a cedar-shingled craftsman with a wraparound porch, nestled in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. From the outside, we were an all-American family: Mom, Dad, 2 daughters, and a golden retriever named Buddy. My childhood photos show 4th of July barbecues with red, white, and blue streamers, Easter egg hunts in the backyard, and summer trips to Disneyland. Smiling faces, matching sweaters, the works. But photos don't tell the whole story. They can't capture the way love feels when it's rationed, or the ache of knowing you're not quite enough. I was 6 the first time I noticed I was different. It was a Sunday dinner, the kind where Mom would set out her good china and Dad would carve the roast like he was performing surgery. Lily, my younger sister, was 4, all curly blonde hair and big blue eyes, giggling as she flicked mashed potatoes across the table. One splattered on my plate and I laughed, thinking it was a game. Mom's head snapped up. "Sarah, what did you do?" Her voice was sharp, like I'd broken something precious. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "It was Lily," I said, pointing at my sister, who was now smearing gravy on her placemat. Mom's eyes flicked to Lily, then back to me. "Don't blame your sister, you're older. You should know better." Dad didn't look up from his plate, just kept chewing. Lily stuck out her tongue and I swallowed the lump in my throat. That moment stuck with me, not because of the potatoes, but because of what it taught me. When Lily messed up, it was cute, spirited, and a sign of her big personality. When I did something wrong, or even when I didn't, it was a failure, a reason to be corrected. Lily's tantrums at the grocery store were just a phase. My quiet obedience was expected, unremarkable. If Lily got a C on a spelling test, Mom would pin it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. My straight A's got a nod and, "That's what we expect from you, Sarah." It wasn't cruel, not exactly. It was subtle, a slow drip of difference that made me feel like I was always auditioning for a role I'd never get. By the time I was 10, the differences were impossible to ignore. Lily got the bigger bedroom with the ocean view window, even though I was older. She picked the movies on family night, while my suggestions were too serious. Her finger-painted seascapes were framed and hung in the living room. My sketches were tucked into a folder in the hall closet. "Lily needs encouragement," Dad would say when I asked why her art got the spotlight. "You're naturally talented, Sarah. You don't need the extra push." I wanted to ask why my hard work didn't deserve a frame, but I didn't. I learned early that questions like that made Mom's lips tighten and Dad's newspaper rustle louder. The truth hit me when I was 12, one rainy afternoon in late fall. I was rummaging in the attic for an old board game, the kind Lily and I used to play before she decided I was boring. Under a pile of dusty blankets, I found a shoebox labeled Keepsakes. Inside were baby photos, hospital bracelets, and a faded Polaroid of a woman I didn't recognize holding a newborn. The woman had dark hair like mine, not the blonde of Mom, Dad, and Lily. On the back, in unfamiliar handwriting, was scrawled, "Laura with baby, 1997. My heart thudded. I was born in 1997. I shoved the photo in my pocket and went downstairs, my hands shaking. At dinner, I waited until Lily was distracted, chasing Buddy around the kitchen. I slid the photo across the table to Mom. "Who's this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's fork paused midair, her eyes locking on the Polaroid. Dad glanced over, his jaw tightening. "Where did you find that?" Mom asked, her tone too calm, like she was defusing a bomb. "In the attic," I said. "Is that me? Who's Laura?" Mom forced a smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. "Oh, honey, that's just an old friend's baby. You must have misread the date." She tucked the photo into her napkin and changed the subject to Lily's school play. Dad didn't say a word, but his knuckles were white around his glass. That night I lay awake, replaying their reaction. They hadn't answered my question. They hadn't even looked surprised, just caught. The word adopted floated into my mind, unbidden, like a wave washing up on the shore. It explained everything, my dark hair and hazel eyes against their blonde and blue uniformity, the way I never felt like I fit, no matter how hard I tried. I wanted to confront them, to demand the truth, but fear stopped me. What if they admitted it? What if they didn't? Either way, I wasn't ready to hear it. So I buried the photo in my dresser drawer and pretended everything was fine. From then on, I doubled down on being perfect. If I couldn't be loved for who I was, maybe I could be valued for what I did. I aced every test, joined every club, and graduated high school as valedictorian. I earned a full ride to Oregon State, where I studied computer science and started my first tech company at 21, a startup building apps for small businesses. Mom and Dad came to my graduation, of course. They smiled for the cameras, shook hands with my professors, and bragged about our Sarah to anyone who'd listen. But their pride felt hollow, like they were admiring a trophy, not a daughter. There was always a distance in their eyes, a wall I could never climb. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Margaret Bennett. She lived in a historic cottage overlooking Ecola State Park, a cozy place filled with driftwood sculptures, dog-eared novels, and the scent of lavender tea. Every summer from the time I was 13, I'd spend weeks with her, away from the suffocating expectations of home. We'd walk the beach at dawn, collecting agates, or sit on her porch, talking about everything from coding to constellations. One evening when I was 15, she looked at me over her teacup and said, "You have your mother's spirit." My heart skipped. "Mom's?" I asked, confused. Karen Bennett was many things, but spirited wasn't one of them. Grandma Margaret's face softened and she patted my hand. "Someone who loved you deeply but couldn't keep you. Someday I'll tell you more." I pressed her, but she just smiled and said, "When you're ready, sweetheart." Someday never came. In college, Grandma would dodge my questions with, "After you graduate." After graduation, it was, "When you're settled in your career." I kept asking, but her answers stayed vague, like she was protecting me from something heavy. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mom and Dad grew colder. Dad's law firm took on a client that competed with my startup, and when I called him out, he shrugged and said, "Business is business, Sarah." Lily, who'd followed Dad's path into pre-med, bonded with him over medical journals, leaving me out of their inside jokes. Every family dinner felt like a performance, with me playing the dutiful daughter to an audience that wasn't watching. The breaking point came 3 years ago, at a Christmas Eve dinner at Grandma Margaret's cottage. The table was set with her vintage linens, and the air smelled of roasted turkey and pine. Grandma, frailer than I remembered, beamed as I shared news about my company's latest app, which helped local shops track inventory. "Sarah's changing the world," she said, her voice warm with pride. Mom's smile was tight. "She's always been so driven," she said, like it was a flaw. "Driven?" I echoed, setting down my glass. "Is that what you call it?" Dad sipped his wine, unfazed. "It's common for adopted kids to overachieve," he said casually, as if commenting on the weather. The room went silent. Lily's fork clattered against her plate. "What?" she whispered, looking from Dad to me. My heart pounded. For 15 years they'd denied it, which made me feel crazy for asking. Now Dad had just dropped the truth like it was nothing. "You knew?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mom waved a hand, dismissing it. "You've known since you were 12, Sarah. No need to make a scene. I stared at her, stunned. You told me I was dreaming. You lied to my face. Dad sighed, like I was being difficult. We gave you a good life, Sarah. A nice home, a top education. Most kids in your situation would be grateful. Grandma Margaret's hand slammed on the table. Enough, Karen, she's your daughter. But it wasn't enough. Years of feeling like an outsider, of chasing their approval, came crashing down. You never wanted me, I said, standing, my napkin falling to the floor. You wanted a prop, someone to make you look good. I'm done. I walked out into the foggy night, the sound of waves drowning out their voices. That was the last time I spoke to them. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment in Portland, and cut contact. Grandma Margaret was the only one I kept close, meeting her for coffee every Sunday at a beachside cafe. They love you, she'd say, her eyes sad. They just don't know how. I'd shake my head. Love shouldn't feel like this. When she passed away 6 months ago, I was in Seattle for a conference. Mom and Dad didn't call to tell me. I found out through a lawyer's letter, informing me Grandma had left me her cottage and most of her estate. I never got to hear the truth about my birth parents from her, but life had a way of uncovering secrets when I least expected it. Walking away from that Christmas Eve dinner, with the Oregon fog swallowing my footsteps, felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. I was done chasing love that came with strings, done pretending I belonged where I wasn't wanted. But freedom doesn't erase the ache. It just gives you space to feel it. For the next 3 years, I built a life that didn't need Karen and Thomas Bennett's approval. I poured my heart into my work, my dreams, and the one person who'd always seen me, Grandma Margaret. But life has a way of testing you, and one rainy evening, it threw me into a storm I never saw coming. After that night, I left Cannon Beach behind and moved to Portland's Pearl District, trading the salty air for city lights and cobblestone streets. My new home was a loft with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place that felt alive with possibility. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the hum of streetcars, trying to drown out the memory of Mom's dismissive wave and Dad's casual betrayal. They never called, never reached out. Not even a text. It was like I'd vanished from their story, and maybe I always had. Work became my anchor. My startup, Coastal Code, was gaining traction, building apps that helped small businesses, from crab shacks to indie bookstores, compete with the big dogs. I rented a desk in a co-working space downtown, surrounded by other dreamers, coders with laptops, artists sketching on tablets, entrepreneurs pitching ideas over coffee. My business partner, Jenna Torres, was a force of nature, all sharp wit and endless energy. She'd push me to take risks, like pitching to investors or launching new features. "You're not just building apps, Sarah," she'd say, her eyes gleaming. "You're building a legacy." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I wondered if I was just running from the family I'd never had. Success didn't come easy. I worked late nights, fueled by takeout and ambition, tweaking code until my eyes burned. By 25, we'd secured funding from a Seattle venture firm, and Coastal Code was featured in a tech magazine as Oregon's next big thing. I framed the article and hung it in my loft, not for vanity, but as a reminder that I was enough, even if my parents never thought so. Friends from college would visit, marveling at my life, the trendy apartment, the growing company. "You've got it all," they'd say, clinking wine glasses. I'd smile, but the truth was heavier. You can have everything and still feel like something's missing. Grandma Margaret was my lifeline. Every Sunday I'd drive back to Cannon Beach, winding through misty forests to her cottage by Ecola State Park. We'd sit by her fireplace sipping chamomile tea while she told stories about her youth, sailing trips, poetry readings, a life full of color. She'd ask about my work and my dreams and listen like every word mattered. One afternoon, as rain pattered on the roof, I asked again about my birth parents. Her face clouded and she set down her cup. "They loved you, Sarah, but life was cruel to them. I'll tell you everything when the time's right." I pushed, my voice sharp with frustration. When, Grandma? I'm not a kid anymore. She reached for my hand, her fingers frail but warm. Soon, I promise. I just want you to be strong enough to carry it. I didn't understand then, but I trusted her. She was the only family who'd ever chosen me. My parents, meanwhile, acted like I'd never existed. I heard through a cousin that they'd redecorated my old bedroom into a home gym, as if erasing every trace of me. Lily, who was now in medical school, sent me a birthday card once, but it was generic, the kind you grab at a gas station. I didn't reply. The distance hurt, but it was cleaner this way. I'd spent too long begging for scraps of affection. Now, I am done. The cracks in my new life showed up at a Memorial Day barbecue 2 years ago, hosted by a family friend in Cannon Beach. I almost didn't go, but Grandma Margaret insisted. You can't hide forever, she said, her voice gentle but firm. So I drove down, wearing my best fake smile, and stepped into a backyard filled with laughter, string lights, and the smell of grilled burgers. Mom and Dad were there, mingling like nothing had happened. Lily was by the dessert table, chatting with a neighbor, her laughter bright and easy. I felt like a ghost, invisible in a place I used to call home. Grandma pulled me into a hug, whispering, "You're stronger than they know." But strength didn't shield me from Mom's cold nod or Dad's quick glance, like I was a stranger who'd wandered in. During dinner, I shared news about Coastal Code's latest app, which streamlined supply chains for local farms. Grandma beamed. "Sarah's making a difference," she said, squeezing my arm. Mom's lips thinned. "Always so ambitious," she said. Her tone clipped, like ambition was a dirty word. Dad chimed in, sipping his beer. "Some kids feel they have to prove themselves. It's normal for, you know." He didn't say adopted, but the word hung in the air, heavy as the ocean fog. Lily's eyes widened, her burger halfway to her mouth. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, looking at Dad. I gripped my plate, my knuckles white. "Go ahead, Dad," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "Say it," Mom cut in, her smile plastic. "Not now, Sarah. Let's not ruin the day." Ruin the day? They'd ruined years of my life, lying about who I was, making me feel like I didn't belong. I stood, my chair scraping the grass. I'm not the one hiding the truth. I walked away, ignoring Grandma's call, and drove back to Portland, the coastline blurring through tears I refused to let fall. That barbecue was the last time I saw my parents. I threw myself deeper into work, channeling the hurt into code, meetings, and growth. Coastal Code expanded, hiring new developers and moving to a bigger office with a view of the Willamette River. Jenna became my rock, showing up with pizza when I worked too late, reminding me to breathe. "You don't have to carry the world," she'd say, tossing a crust at me. I'd laugh, but the weight never left. I was building something real, but the hole where the family should have been grew heavier every day. Grandma Margaret's health started fading that winter. She'd call me, her voice weaker, talking about the tides or her garden, avoiding the hospital visits she didn't want me to worry about. I'd drive to her cottage, bringing her favorite lemon scones, and we'd sit on her porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the waves. "You're my heart, Sarah," she'd say, her eyes misty. I wanted to ask about my birth parents again, but I couldn't bear to push her when she looked so fragile. When she passed away in her sleep, I was in San Francisco, pitching to investors. No one called me, not Mom, not Dad, not Lily. A lawyer's letter arrived a week later, stating Grandma had left me her cottage and most of her savings. The silence from my family was louder than any words. The day of the accident started like any other Tuesday. I was at the office tweaking a new app feature that helped fisheries track sustainable catches. Rain fell in sheets outside, a classic Oregon drizzle that turned the city gray. Jenna poked her head in around 7. "Go home, Sarah, the code's fine." I shook my head, my fingers still flying across the keyboard. "One more test," I said, too stubborn to quit. By 9, the office was empty, and the rain had thickened into a downpour. I grabbed my bike, a sleek road model I used to commute, and pedaled toward my loft, the city lights smearing in the wet. I should have taken the bus. Portland's bike lanes are good, but the intersection at Northwest 23rd and Everett is tricky, with a curve that hides oncoming traffic. Locals know to slow down, but the driver who hit me wasn't local. I remember headlights flashing too close, too fast, and the blare of a horn. My bike skidded, tires slipping on the slick pavement. Then came the impact, a sickening crunch of metal against bone. My body flew, weightless for a moment, before slamming into the asphalt. Pain exploded in my chest, my arm, and my head. The world spun, rain mixing with blood in my eyes. I heard voices, distant and frantic, a woman shouting for an ambulance. Someone knelt beside me, saying my name. But I couldn't answer. Darkness pulled me under. And I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. In that void, I didn't dream of my parents' love or Lily's laughter. I saw Grandma Margaret's face, her gentle smile telling me I was enough. I clung to that image, even as the pain tried to drag me away. I didn't know then that the worst betrayal was still to come, that the people who'd raised me would leave me to die, or that a letter would change everything. But in that moment, lying broken on a Portland street, I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Floating in darkness, I wasn't sure if I was alive or gone. The pain came in waves, sharp and relentless, then faded into a dull hum. Sounds drifted through the void, beeps, hushed voices, the squeak of shoes on tile. I wanted to scream, to tell someone I was still here, but my body wouldn't obey. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own skin, listening as the world decided my fate. That rainy Portland night, when my bike crumpled under a car's bumper, had broken more than my bones. It broke the last thread tying me to the family I'd once called mine. But in that hospital room, where hope hung by a thread, I found something stronger than their betrayal. People who chose to fight for me. The accident left me in pieces. They told me later I'd been rushed to Providence Medical Center, my body a map of damage. Fractured spine, punctured lung, internal bleeding. My helmet saved my skull, but the impact rattled my brain, and the doctors put me in a medically induced coma to stabilize the swelling. I don't know how long I drifted in that half-world, time slipping like sand through my fingers. My first clear memory was a voice, calm and steady, cutting through the fog. "Sarah, you're in the hospital. You're safe now." I couldn't see her, couldn't move, but I clung to those words like a lifeline. I learned her name later, Nurse Clara Nguyen, a soft-spoken woman with a knack for talking to patients like they could hear every word. She'd adjust my IV, her hands gentle, and murmur updates. "It's raining again, Sarah, but the cherry blossoms are holding up. You'd love the pink against the gray." She'd play music from her phone, indie folk, soft guitar strums, saying it helped coma patients feel less alone. I wanted to thank her, to tell her she was keeping me tethered, but all I could do was listen, my mind awake while my body slept. The doctors' voices were colder, clipped with jargon. "Severe spinal trauma," one said, a man with a gravelly tone. "We've controlled the bleeding, but the next 48 hours are critical. She'll need surgery to stabilize the vertebrae, and that's just the start." Another voice, a woman, asked, "Have we reached her family?" My heart, or whatever part of me could still feel, tightened. Family. The word felt like a bruise. I didn't expect them to come, not after 3 years of silence, but some small part of me hoped. Maybe, just maybe, they'd show up when it mattered most. They did show up, but not for me. I heard their voices one evening, sharp and familiar, slicing through the haze. Karen and Thomas Bennett, my parents, stood somewhere near my bed, their presence as cold as the hospital air. "What's her condition?" Dad asked, his tone all business, like he was reviewing a contract. Dr. Patel, the gravelly-voiced surgeon, explained, "Broken spine, lung damage, coma to manage swelling." "She's stable for now," he said, "but we need to discuss surgical options and long-term care." "It's extensive and costly," Mom's voice cut in, impatient. "What's the prognosis?" "Will she walk again?" Work? I could almost see her, arms crossed, her real estate agent smiling nowhere in sight. Dr. Patel paused, probably weighing how to answer. It's too early to say. With surgery and rehab, there's a chance for partial recovery, but it'll be a long road. We need authorization to proceed. Silence hung heavy, and I waited, my mind screaming for them to care, to fight for me. Dad spoke first, his voice low. There's been a misunderstanding. She's not our biological daughter. My chest tightened, or it would have if I could feel it. Not their daughter. The words echoed, stripping away years of trying to belong. Mom jumped in, her tone sharp. She was adopted informally. No legal papers were finalized. We're not responsible for her care. I wanted to scream, to tell them they'd raised me, signed my report cards, and sat through my school plays. Informal? They'd lied to me, to everyone, and now they were lying to the doctors to wash their hands of me. Dr. Patel's voice hardened. She listed you as emergency contacts. That implies responsibility. Mom laughed, a brittle sound. She's not our obligation. We gave her a home and an education. That's more than enough. Dad added, smooth as ever, isn't there a state program for cases like this? Unclaimed patients? Unclaimed. Like I was a lost suitcase, not their daughter. The doctor's silence was deafening. I imagined her staring, shocked at their callousness. Without authorization, she said finally, we'll need to seek emergency provisions. This is a critical case. Mom's voice turned icy. Do what you need to, but don't involve us. We're not paying for this. Footsteps echoed, a door clicked shut, and they were gone. They'd walked away, leaving me to die, as if 28 years meant nothing. The pain of that betrayal cut deeper than any broken bone, a wound no surgery could fix. Clara's voice broke the silence later, soft and angry. I've never seen anything like it, she muttered, adjusting my blanket. Their own kid and they just leave. Another nurse maybe replied, Money talks, Clara. They're probably worried about the bill. Clara snorted. They're worried about their image. Call the social worker. There's got to be someone who cares about her. I wanted to tell Clara I was here, that I heard her, but my body was a cage, locking me in. Time blurred, hours or days I couldn't tell. Pain flared and faded, meds dripping through my veins. Clara kept talking, her voice a beacon. Your friend Jenna's here, she said one day. She's raising hell, making sure you get the best care. Jenna. My heart lifted, or tried to. I pictured her, all fierce determination, probably arguing with every doctor in sight. She authorized the surgery, Clara added. You're going in tomorrow. You're going to pull through, Sarah. I know it. Surgery. The word should have scared me, but it didn't. Jenna was fighting for me. Clara was fighting for me. I wasn't alone, not entirely. The surgery happened, though I don't remember it. Bright lights maybe, or the hum of machines, but it's a blank. When I surfaced again, the pain was sharper, more defined, like my body was waking up. Clara was there, her voice steady. You did great, Sarah. The surgeons fixed your spine and patched up your lung. They're easing you out of the coma soon. I wanted to ask about my parents, if they'd come back, but deep down I knew they hadn't. Their absence was a truth I couldn't escape, a weight heavier than the tubes in my chest. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, a twitch in my finger when Clara asked me to squeeze her hand. Then, light seeping through my eyelids, harsh and blinding. Finally, the breathing tube came out. A choking, burning ordeal that left me gasping. You're back, Clara said, her face blurry above me. Welcome to the land of the living. I tried to speak, my throat raw. Jenna, I croaked. Clara nodded, her eyes warm. She's in the waiting room, probably terrorizing the staff. I'll get her. I lay there, the hospital room coming into focus. White walls, green curtains, the steady beep of a monitor. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and wrong, but I was alive. Against all odds, I was alive. Jenna burst in, her dark hair wild, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "You scared the hell out of me," she said, grabbing my hand. "Don't ever do that again." I managed a weak smile, my lips cracking. "No promises." She laughed, but it broke into a sob, and she sank into the chair beside me. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. I wanted to tell her about my parents, about what I'd heard, but the words wouldn't come, not yet. The wound was too fresh, too deep. Recovery was a battle. Every breath hurt, my ribs aching from the lung repair. Moving my legs was like pushing through mud, the spinal injury making every twitch a victory. Physical therapists came daily, guiding me through exercises that left me sweating and dizzy. "You're tough," said one, a guy named Mike with a kind smile. "Most people would have given up by now." I didn't feel tough. I felt broken, not just in body, but in spirit. My parents hadn't just walked away from my hospital bed. They'd walked away from my entire life, confirming what I'd always feared. I was never theirs, not really. Jenna was there every day, bringing my laptop and updating me on coastal code. "The team's holding it together," she said, setting up a tablet so I could video call the office. "But they miss their fearless leader." She didn't push me to talk about my family, but she knew. Clara had told her everything, how Karen and Thomas had refused to help, how they'd claimed I wasn't their daughter. "They're monsters," Jenna said one night, her voice low. "But you're stronger than them." I wanted to believe her, but the truth sat like a stone in my chest. My parents had left me to die, and nothing could undo that. Clara became my other anchor. During her shifts, she'd sit by my bed, reading articles about Portland's food scene, or telling me about her cat, Muffin, who loved stealing socks. "You're going to love this city again," she said, adjusting my pillow. "Food trucks, bike trails, the works." Her kindness wasn't just professional, it was personal, like she'd decided I was worth saving. One evening she hesitated, then said, "Your parents, they're trying to access your medical records, claiming they're worried." I laughed, a harsh, painful sound. "Worried? They told the doctors to let me go." Clara's face tightened. "I know, we're not letting them near you. Jenna's lawyer's on it." That night, alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling. The monitor's beep, my only company. My parents weren't worried about me. They were worried about Grandma Margaret's estate, the cottage, and the savings she'd left me. They'd always cared more about appearances than love, and now they were circling, ready to claim what wasn't theirs. I couldn't fight them yet, not from a hospital bed, but a fire sparked inside me. They thought I was gone, or weak enough to ignore. They were wrong. I'd survived their neglect my whole life, and I'd survive this. When the time came, I'd make sure they faced the truth, not just about me, but about themselves. Waking up each day in that Portland hospital room, with its sterile walls and relentless beeping, felt like a victory, but not a triumph. My body was healing, stitches dissolving, bones knitting, but the real wound, the one carved by my parents' betrayal, festered deep inside. They'd left me to die, called me unclaimed, and now they were sniffing around Grandma Margaret's estate, ready to snatch what she'd entrusted to me. I wasn't strong enough to fight them yet, not from a bed with tubes in my chest, but every painful step forward fueled a fire in me. I'd survive, not just for me, but to make sure they faced the truth. And when I found Grandma's letter, tucked away like a secret she'd guarded too long, I realized the truth was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Recovery was a grueling marathon, not a sprint. After a month at Providence Medical Center, I transferred to a rehab facility on Portland's east side, a low brick building with a view of Mount Tabor's green slopes. The place smelled of antiseptic and hope, a strange mix that clung to every surface. My spinal injury made movement a battle. My legs, once strong from biking Portland's hills, felt like they belonged to someone else. Physical therapy was torture. Hours of lifting, stretching, and cursing under my breath as my therapist, Lena, coached me through each rep. "You're rewriting your story," she'd say, her voice steady as I gripped the parallel bars, sweat dripping onto the mat. I didn't feel like a writer. I felt like a draft, scratched it out, and started over. Jenna visited daily, her presence a burst of color in the gray routine. She'd bring smoothies from the food carts downtown, regaling me with tales of Coastal Code's latest wins. A new contract with a winery, a shout-out on a tech podcast. "You're still the brains of this operation," she'd say, tossing me a pen like I could code from my wheelchair. I'd laugh, but it hurt, not just physically. My parents' voices echoed in my head. "She's not our daughter." I told Jenna everything one night, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. She listened, her jaw tight, then squeezed my hand. "They don't get to define you, Sarah. You do." Her words stuck, a seed of strength I hadn't known I needed. Nurse Clara, who'd followed me to rehab as a home care liaison, was another lifeline. She'd check my vitals, then linger, sharing stories about her family's pho recipe or the time she hiked Multnomah Falls. "You're tougher than you think," she said once, adjusting my brace. "You've got a fighter's heart." I wanted to believe her, but the mirror told a different story. Pale skin, shadowed eyes, a body that felt like a stranger's. Still, I pushed forward, driven by a quiet fury. Karen and Thomas Bennett thought I'd fade away. I'd prove them wrong, one agonizing step at a time. 3 months after the accident, I was cleared to leave rehab. Jenna offered her apartment, but I needed somewhere that felt like home, somewhere that held Grandma Margaret's warmth. I moved into her cottage in Cannon Beach, the place she'd left me, with its creaky floors and windows that framed the Pacific's endless churn. The first night, I sat on the porch, a blanket over my lap, listening to the waves. The air was sharp with salt, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But the cottage wasn't just a refuge, it was a battleground. My parents, I'd learned, were already challenging the will, claiming the estate should have gone to them. They hadn't visited me, hadn't called, but they were quick to stake a claim on what wasn't theirs. The truth about my past came unexpectedly, on a foggy morning as I sorted through Grandma's things. Her study, a cozy nook lined with books and seashells, felt like her still, her presence in every dog-eared novel. I was dusting her desk when I noticed a loose panel in the drawer. Curiosity tugged at me, and I pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small wooden box, carved with a wave pattern, and a note in Grandma's elegant script. "For Sarah, when you're ready." My hands trembled as I opened it. There, nestled in velvet, was a letter, sealed with wax, and a stack of documents tied with twine. I sat on the floor, the letter heavy in my hands, and broke the seal. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, I've failed to tell you the truth in person. Forgive me for my silence. Some stories are hard to share, especially when they're woven with love and loss." Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. Grandma wrote that my birth mother was her niece, Rachel Bennett, a bright, troubled artist who'd gotten pregnant at 19. Rachel loved me fiercely but was battling addiction, unable to care for a newborn. My birth father, a musician who'd left town, wanted no part of us. Grandma suggested adoption to her son Thomas and his wife Karen, who'd been struggling to conceive. It seemed perfect, a way to keep me in the family. But weeks after they took me in, Karen learned she was pregnant with Lily. Suddenly, I was one of two, and over time, their love tilted toward the daughter who shared their blood. Grandma watched it happen, confronted Thomas, begged him to treat me equally, but he couldn't or wouldn't. "I saw how they diminished you," she wrote, "and it broke my heart. You are legally their daughter, Sarah, with every right that entails. I've included the adoption papers to prove it. Rachel passed away 7 years ago, a car accident, but she never stopped asking about you. She was so proud of the woman you've become. The letter ended with a plea. This cottage, my savings, everything I have is yours, not just by my choice but by blood. You are my family, always. I read it twice, then opened the documents. My original birth certificate, naming Rachel Bennett as my mother. The adoption papers, signed by Karen and Thomas, an amended certificate listing them as my parents. It was all there, proof that I was a Bennett, legally and by lineage, despite their lies to the hospital. Rachel's face, from a photo tucked in the box, stared back at me. Dark hair, hazel eyes, my eyes. I pressed the photo to my chest, tears falling freely. Grandma had kept her promise, even in death, giving me the truth I'd craved my whole life. But with it came a new weight. My parents had known this all along and still chose to cast me aside. The next day, I called a lawyer, Ellen Carver, a sharp-witted woman recommended by Jenna. Ellen's office in downtown Portland overlooked the river, its walls lined with law books and local art. I handed her the documents, my voice steady as I recounted my parents' hospital betrayal and their move on the estate. They're claiming Grandma was coerced into leaving me the cottage, I said, my hands clenched. They're saying I'm unfit to manage it, that my injuries make me incompetent. Ellen's eyes narrowed, scanning the adoption papers. They're lying, she said flatly. The adoption's airtight, and your medical records show you're recovering, not incapacitated. They're trying to bully you out of what's yours. She leaned forward, her voice firm. Your parents filed a trust dispute, arguing they're the rightful heirs since you're not their true daughter. But with these documents, their case is flimsy. We'll need to present your recovery progress and the letter to the probate court. Are you ready for that? I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Ready wasn't the right word, but I was determined. They'd left me to die, then tried to steal my grandmother's legacy. I wouldn't let them win, not this time. Ellen moved fast, requesting hospital records and security footage from Providence, where cameras had caught my parents' cold dismissal. This will bury their narrative, she said, her smile grim. They told the doctors you weren't their responsibility. That's not the story they'll want a judge to hear. I also hired a security firm to protect the cottage, installing cameras and new locks. The thought of Karen and Thomas walking through Grandma's home claiming her things made my skin crawl. We'll monitor remotely, the security tech said, showing me an app to view live feeds. No one's getting in without your say-so. Back at the cottage, I threw myself into recovery with a new purpose. I walked without a cane now, though my legs still wobbled on long days. Lena, who visited weekly, pushed me through exercises on the beach, the sand soft under my feet. You're a miracle, she said, watching me take unsteady steps toward the surf. I didn't feel miraculous, but I felt alive, and that was enough. Jenna and Clara became regulars at the cottage, filling it with laughter and takeout from Portland's food trucks. This place is you, Jenna said one night, sprawled on the couch with a taco. It's got heart. I smiled, but my mind was on the fight ahead. My parents' actions grew bolder. Ellen called one afternoon, her voice tight. They've requested a court hearing to freeze the estate, claiming you're mentally unfit due to your accident. I gripped the phone, standing on the cottage porch, the ocean roaring below. They're using my recovery against me? Ellen sighed. It's a desperate move. They know the trust is solid, so they're grasping at straws. We'll counter with your medical reports and the footage. The judge won't buy their story. I thanked her, but the call left me shaken. They weren't just after the cottage. They wanted to erase me, to rewrite my existence as a burden they'd never wanted. That night, I sat in Grandma's study, Rachel's photo beside me. The letter had given me roots, a sense of who I was, but it also sharpened my resolve. My parents thought they could outmaneuver me, that I'd crumble under their lies. They didn't know the woman I'd become, forged in pain and truth. I opened my laptop, staring at a blank document. The letter I'd left for them was taking shape in my mind, not yet written, but alive, a reckoning they couldn't escape. It wouldn't just be words, it would be proof of their betrayal, of my survival, of the family I was building without them. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. Not as their daughter, but as Sarah Bennett, whole and unbroken. Standing on the porch of Grandma Margaret's cottage, with the Pacific wind tugging at my hair, I felt a shift inside me. The truth about my birth mother, Rachel, had anchored me, but my parents' greed, their attempt to steal what Grandma left me, lit a spark I couldn't ignore. They'd left me to die in that Portland hospital, called me unclaimed, and now thought they could waltz into my life and take what wasn't theirs. I wasn't the scared girl who'd walked away from their Christmas Eve dinner. I was Sarah Bennett, and I was done hiding. Writing the letter that would wait for them wasn't just about justice. It was about freedom for me, and maybe even for Lily, if she could see the truth. As I prepared for their arrival, every step felt like a reclaiming of my own story. The idea for the letter came during a therapy session in Portland, a few weeks after I'd settled into the cottage. My therapist, Dr. Ellis, had a calm way of cutting through my defenses, her office a cozy space with a view of the Willamette River. "What do you want to say to them?" she asked, her pen poised over a notebook. I shifted in the armchair, my legs still stiff from rehab. "I want them to know what they did," I said, my voice low. "Not just the hospital, but all of it, making me feel like I didn't belong." Dr. Ellis nodded. "And what do you want for yourself?" That question stopped me cold. I'd spent so long fighting their rejection, I hadn't thought about what I needed. "I want to be free," I whispered. "Free of needing them to love me." That night, back at the cottage, I sat at Grandma's desk, the wooden box with Rachel's photo beside me. The ocean roared outside, a storm brewing over Cannon Beach, and the lamplight cast soft shadows on the walls. I opened my laptop, but words didn't come. Anger surged. Years of their lies, their cold dismissal in the hospital. But rage wasn't enough. Dr. Ellis's words echoed, "What do you want for yourself?" I closed the laptop and picked up a pen, letting my heart lead. The letter poured out, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, reflecting their actions and my survival. "Dear Karen and Thomas," I wrote, "I'm addressing you by your names because Mom and Dad don't fit anymore. Parents protect, they sacrifice, and they choose their child even when it's hard. You chose yourselves every time." I detailed their neglect, the way they favored Lily, dismissed my achievements, lied about my adoption. I wrote about the hospital, their voices clear in my memory. "She's not our daughter, we owe her nothing." I included the truth from Grandma's letter, that Rachel was my mother, that the adoption was legal, and that I was a Bennett by blood and right. But the letter wasn't just an accusation. It was released. "I forgive you," I wrote, "not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I'm done carrying your rejection. I'm whole without you." I sealed the letter in an envelope, my hand steady, and placed it in the wooden box. It wasn't for them, not really. It was for me, a way to let go of the girl who'd begged for their love. But I knew they'd read it, and when they did, they'd see themselves for what they were. The letter would wait in the cottage, a truth they couldn't ignore, but I needed more than words to protect what was mine. My parents were cunning, and they wouldn't stop at a trust dispute. I had to be ready. Ellen Carver, my lawyer, became my strategist. Her Portland office was a hub of action, papers stacked on her desk, and a coffee mug proclaiming "Justice brews here." Over a call, she updated me on my parents' moves. "They've pushed for a court-ordered inspection of the cottage," she said, her voice crisp. "They're claiming they need to assess its condition for the trust, but it's a pretext to challenge your ownership. The hearing is set for next Saturday, and they're bringing Lily." My heart stuttered at Lily's name. I hadn't seen her since the Memorial Day barbecue and hadn't heard from her since my accident. Was she with them or just caught in their web? "What's their angle?" I asked, gripping my phone on the cottage porch. Ellen sighed. "They're arguing you're unfit to manage the estate, citing your injuries. But we've got the hospital footage, your medical reports, and Grandma's documents. They're walking into a trap. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. The hospital footage, Karen and Thomas telling the doctors to let me go, was my ace. But I needed to secure the cottage itself. I hired a tech firm, WaveGuard, to install a smart home system. Their team arrived the next day, a group of young coders who reminded me of Coastal Code's early days. "We're wiring the place with motion sensors, cameras, and audio," their lead, Nate, explained, drilling into the cottage's beams. "You'll control it all from an app. Live feeds, cloud backups, the works." I watched them work, the cottage's old-world charm blending with new-world tech. "Make sure it's discreet," I said. "I don't want them knowing they're being watched." Nate grinned. "They'll never suspect a thing." Jenna was my rock through it all, driving from Portland to help me prepare. We sat in the cottage's living room, the smart home app open on my tablet, testing camera angles. "This is some spy movie stuff," she said, zooming in on the dining room table where the letter would wait. I laughed, but it was hollow. "I just want them to face what they did." Jenna's eyes softened. "They will, Sarah. And you're not doing this alone." She stayed late, helping me organize Grandma's documents, birth certificates, adoption papers, Rachel's photo for Ellen. "You're building a fortress," she said, taping a box shut. "Not just the cottage, but you." I hugged her, grateful for her fire, her faith in me. Clara visited too, her nurse's pragmatism grounding me. Over coffee on the porch, she shared news from Providence. "Your parents tried accessing your records again," she said, stirring her mug. "They're claiming parental rights, but the hospital shut them down. Ellen's got them cornered." I stared at the ocean, waves crashing under a gray sky. "They're desperate," I said. "They know they're losing." Clara nodded, her voice gentle. "You're winning, Sarah. Not just the cottage, but your life." Her words lingered, a reminder that this fight wasn't just about property. It was about claiming my place in the world. The days before the inspection were a blur of preparation. Ellen called daily, refining our strategy. "The judge approved their visit," she said, "but it's supervised. A court officer will be there, and we'll have the footage ready if they try anything. Place the letter where they'll find it." I chose the dining room table, a polished oak surface where Grandma and I had shared countless meals. The letter, in its envelope, would sit there, addressed to Karen and Thomas in my careful handwriting. A silent challenge. I tested the smart home system, watching feeds of the empty cottage and the cameras hidden in light fixtures and bookshelves. Everything was ready, but my heart raced at the thought of Lily. Would she read the letter? Would she see her parents for who they were? I thought about Lily a lot that week. She'd been the golden child, showered with love I'd never known, but she wasn't cruel, not intentionally. At the barbecue, she'd looked shocked when Dad hinted at my adoption, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Had she known about the hospital? Did she agree with them now, or was she just following their lead? I wanted to believe she could. Watching the live feed from Grandma Margaret's cottage, my heart pounded like the waves crashing beyond Cannon Beach. The smart home cameras, hidden in every corner, showed the kitchen island where my letter waited, its envelope a quiet bomb ready to detonate. Karen and Thomas Bennett, my parents, were coming to claim what they thought was theirs, with Lily trailing behind, her role in their scheme unclear. I sat in Ellen's Portland office, Jenna's hand steady on my shoulder, the tablet screen glowing with the truth I'd laid bare. This wasn't just about protecting the cottage or Grandma's legacy. It was about making them see what they'd done, to me, to our family, to themselves. As the clock struck 2, the door opened, and the storm I'd been waiting for finally broke. The court officer, a stern woman named Ms. Caldwell, arrived first, her clipboard tucked under her arm. She used the key I'd provided Ellen. The locks changed weeks ago to keep my parents out. Karen and Thomas followed, their faces tight with entitlement, as if stepping into Grandma's home was their birthright. Karen's heels clicked on the hardwood, her eyes scanning the room like a real estate agent sizing up a listing. Thomas adjusted his tie, his lawyer's calm barely masking impatience. Lily lagged behind, her blonde hair pulled back, her expression guarded. I leaned closer to the screen, searching her face. Was she here to support them, or was she just caught in their orbit like I'd been for so long? "This inspection is to assess the property's condition," Ms. Caldwell said, her voice flat through the camera's audio. "You're to document items of value, nothing more." Karen nodded, but her smile was sharp, predatory. "Of course," she said, already moving toward Grandma's antique hutch, her fingers brushing the glass. Thomas headed for the study, muttering about family heirlooms. Lily stayed near the kitchen, her hands in her pockets, avoiding her parents' hustle. I held my breath, willing her to notice the envelope on the island, its bold lettering, Karen, Thomas, Lily, impossible to miss. It was Karen who saw it first, her head snapping toward the island like a hawk spotting prey. "What's this?" she said, crossing the room in 3 strides. She picked up the envelope, her brows furrowing at the post-it. "Lily, read this too." Thomas joined her, his face darkening. "Is this some kind of stunt?" he asked, glancing at Ms. Caldwell, who shrugged, uninterested. Lily stepped closer, her curiosity breaking through her reserve. "It's addressed to all of us," she said, her voice soft but firm. Karen tore the envelope open, ignoring Lily's outstretched hand, and pulled out the letter, along with a USB drive taped to the adoption papers. Ellen leaned forward in her office chair, her eyes locked on the screen. "Here we go," she murmured. Jenna squeezed my shoulder, her silence loud with support. I felt like I was back in that hospital bed, hearing my parents' voices abandon me. But this time, I wasn't helpless. I'd written the truth, and now they'd face it. Karen unfolded the letter, her lips moving silently as she read. Her face paled, her hand trembling. Thomas snatched it from her, skimming the pages, his jaw tightening with each line. Lily, still ignored, picked up the adoption papers and the USB, her fingers tracing Rachel's name on my birth certificate. "What is this nonsense?" Thomas finally said, his voice a low growl. He held up the letter, its pages shaking. "Lies, all of it." Karen sank onto a bar stool, her composure cracking. "How dare she?" she whispered, her eyes darting to Ms. Caldwell, who was noting something on her clipboard, oblivious to the drama. Lily's voice cut through, quiet but steady. "What does it say?" She reached for the letter, but Thomas held it high like a child playing keep-away. "It's not your concern," he snapped. Lily's eyes flashed, a spark I hadn't seen since we were kids. "I'm family, Dad. Let me read it." Reluctantly, he handed it over, and the room fell silent, save for the distant roar of the ocean. Lily read, her expression shifting, shock, then pain, then something harder to name. I watched her, my chest tight, remembering the sister who'd once shared my secrets, before our parents' favoritism built a wall between us. When she finished, she set the letter down, her hands trembling, and picked up the USB drive. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen's head snapped up. "Nothing important," she said too quickly. Thomas cleared his throat. "It's probably some doctored recording. Sarah's always been dramatic." Lily ignored them, pulling out her phone and plugging in the USB. The smart home system captured every sound, the faint hum of her earbuds, the crackle of audio from the hospital. I knew what she was hearing. Karen's icy voice saying, "She's not our obligation." Thomas's smooth dismissal. "Isn't there a state program for unclaimed patients?" My own silence, trapped in a coma, unable to beg them to stay. Lily's face crumpled, her hand covering her mouth. She pulled out the earbuds, her eyes wet, and turned to her parents. "You left her to die," she said, her voice breaking. "You told the doctors she wasn't yours." Karen stood, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "It wasn't like that," she said, her tone desperate. "We were overwhelmed. The doctors said she wouldn't make it." Thomas cut in, his voice sharp. "It was a misunderstanding. The adoption was never formalized. We weren't legally—" Lily held up the adoption papers, her grip fierce. "It was formalized. Right here, your signatures. You raised her for 28 years and you walked away when she needed you most." Her words echoed my letter, and I felt a strange pride mixed with pain. She was seeing them, maybe for the first time. Ms. Caldwell glanced up, sensing the tension, but stayed silent, her pen scratching. Karen's voice rose, shrill. "You don't understand, Lily. Sarah's always been difficult, ungrateful." Lily shook her head, stepping back. "Ungrateful? She built a company, she survived your lies, and you tried to steal her inheritance the second you thought she was gone." Thomas's face hardened. "That's enough," he said, his lawyer's tone kicking in. "This is a family matter, not your place to judge." Lily laughed, a bitter sound. "Family? You don't even know what that means." She gathered the letter, the papers, and the USB, clutching them like evidence. "I need air," she said, heading for the door. Karen reached for her. "Lily, wait!" But Lily shook her off, her footsteps echoing on the porch. The camera caught her silhouette against the stormy sky, her shoulders shaking. I wanted to call her to tell her I'd seen her stand up, but I stayed still, my eyes burning. Jenna whispered, "She's waking up, Sarah." "She sees it." Ellen nodded, her voice low. "That footage is gold. They can't spin this in court." Karen and Thomas stayed behind, their voices rising in a frantic huddle. "This is a setup," Thomas said, pacing the kitchen. "She's trying to ruin us." Karen clutched the island, her face ashen. "The footage, Thomas. It's real. People will hear it." He waved a hand, dismissive. "We'll say it was edited. Deep fakes are common now. Our lawyer can handle it." They moved through the cottage, cataloging vases, paintings, anything to bolster their claim. But their confidence was fraying. Karen paused by a photo of Grandma Margaret and me, her fingers hovering, then pulled back. "We should have contested the will sooner," she muttered. Thomas snorted. "We thought she'd die. How did we know she'd pull through?" I closed my eyes, their words a knife I'd expected but still felt. Jenna's hand tightened on my shoulder. "They're digging their own grave," she said. Ellen was already typing, her laptop open. "I'm filing a motion to present the footage and letter in court," she said. "Their trust dispute is dead on arrival." I nodded, but my mind was on Lily. She'd read the letter, heard the truth, and walked away from them. Was it enough? Could we rebuild something from the ashes of our childhood? I didn't know, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. The feed showed Karen and Thomas leaving with Ms. Caldwell, their faces grim, a few small items, a silver tray, a porcelain figurine, tucked under their arms, despite the court's limits. The cottage stood quiet again. The letter's envelope crumpled on the island, its work done. Back in Ellen's office, I exhaled, the weight of months lifting, but not gone. "What now?" Jenna asked, her voice soft. I stared at the screen, the cottage's warm lights glowing against the storm. "I wait for Lily," I said, "and I keep fighting." That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Lily." "Can we talk? Tomorrow, the Driftwood Cafe, 10 a.m. My heart leapt, then steadied. I typed back, "I'll be there," and set the phone down, the ocean's roar filling my mind. The letter had done more than expose my parents. It had cracked open a door to my sister, to a family I might still choose. The fight for the cottage wasn't over, but as I drove back to Cannon Beach, the stars breaking through the clouds, I felt ready for whatever came next. The truth was out, and it was mine to carry forward. Sitting on the edge of my seat at the Tide Pool Cafe in Cannon Beach, I watched the door, my coffee cooling untouched. The ocean churned outside, gray and restless, mirroring the knot in my stomach. Lily's text last night, "Can we talk?" had sparked a fragile hope, but hope was a risky thing. My parents, Karen and Thomas Bennett, had read my letter, heard their own voices abandoning me, and still denied it all. But Lily, my sister, had walked away from them, her eyes opened by the truth. Now, as I waited for her, I wondered if we could salvage something from the wreckage of our family. The letter had done its work, tearing down lies, but this moment, this meeting, would build something new, or end us for good. Either way, I was ready to face it, not as the girl they'd cast aside, but as Sarah Bennett, whole and free. The cafe buzzed with morning chatter, locals sipping lattes, and tourists snapping photos of the foggy beach. When Lily walked in, her blonde hair damp from the drizzle, my breath caught. She looked older, her blue eyes shadowed, like she'd carried a weight she hadn't noticed before. She spotted me, hesitated, then crossed the room, sliding into the booth across from me. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft, almost a question. I nodded, my throat tight. "Thanks for coming." She fiddled with her napkin, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't know," she blurted, "about the hospital, what they did. I swear I didn't know." Her words landed heavy, and I believed her. Lily had her flaws, but cruelty wasn't one of them. I took a sip of coffee, steadying myself. "They told the doctors I wasn't theirs," I said, my voice low. "They left me to die, Lily. You read the letter. You heard it." She flinched, her hands clenching the napkin. "I did," she whispered. "I listened to that audio. Their voices. I can't unhear it." Silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken truths. I wanted to ask why she'd never noticed their favoritism, why she'd let me fade into the background, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What do you want now?" Her eyes met mine, raw and searching. "I want to know you," she said, "not as their daughter but as my sister, if you'll let me." The words hit like a wave, gentle but powerful. I thought of our childhood, her laughter during board games, my quiet envy of her ease in our parents' love. "It won't be easy," I said, my voice steady. "There's a lot of hurt between us." She nodded, tears brimming. "I know. I saw it. In the letter. In how they treated you. I was blind, Sarah. I'm sorry." Her apology wasn't a fix, but it was a start, a crack in the wall we'd built. "Small steps," I said, echoing a promise I'd made to myself. "We try, and we see where it goes." She smiled, small but real, and for the first time in years, I saw the sister I'd loved, not the golden child they'd made her. We talked for an hour, cautious but open, about her medical residency, my work at Coastal Code, and the cottage that held Grandma Margaret's spirit. "It's yours," she said, her voice firm. "Grandma wanted you to have it. They're wrong to fight you." Her words lifted a weight I hadn't named. Lily wasn't with them, not anymore. As we parted, she hugged me, awkward but warm, and promised to call. I walked back to the cottage, the tide receding, feeling lighter than I had in months. The letter hadn't just exposed my parents, it had given me a chance to reclaim my sister, one step at a time. The legal battle came to a head 2 weeks later, in a Portland courtroom that smelled of polished wood and tension. Ellen Carver, my lawyer, stood beside me, her briefcase packed with evidence: hospital records, smart home audio, Grandma's letter, and adoption papers. Karen and Thomas sat across the aisle, their faces composed, their lawyer whispering strategies. Lily wasn't there. She'd moved to a friend's apartment, distancing herself from them. The judge, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, called the case "In re Estate of Margaret Bennett." My heart raced, but I stood tall, my cane gone, my body stronger than it had been since the accident. Ellen presented our case with precision. She played the hospital audio, Karen's voice chilling the room. "She's not our obligation." Thomas's cold agreement: "Unclaimed patients." The judge's face tightened, her pen pausing. Ellen submitted the smart home audio from the cottage, capturing their denial, their greed. "We thought she'd die." She laid out the adoption papers, proving I was legally their daughter, and Grandma's letter, affirming my place in the family. "Sarah Bennett is the rightful heir," Ellen concluded, her voice ringing. Her parents abandoned her in her darkest hour, then sought to exploit her recovery. Justice demands their claim be dismissed. Their lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, argued they'd acted in distress, that the adoption was informal, and that Grandma's will was coerced. But his words faltered under the weight of the evidence. The judge didn't deliberate long. "The trust is clear," she ruled, her voice firm. "Sarah Bennett is the sole beneficiary of Margaret Bennett's estate. The petitioner's claim is denied with prejudice." She went further, her tone cutting. "The audio evidence reveals a profound betrayal. This court will not reward such conduct." The gavel fell, and the courtroom exhaled. Ellen squeezed my hand, her smile fierce. "We did it," she whispered. Karen and Thomas left without a glance, their shoulders stiff, their world crumbling. I learned later they'd faced more than legal defeat. The audio, leaked to local news, spread through Cannon Beach's tight-knit circles. Friends distanced themselves, their country club membership was re-evaluated, and their real estate and law practices took hits. A month later, they left Oregon, relocating to Arizona. No goodbyes, no apologies. I didn't mourn their absence. They'd left me long before they packed their bags, and I was done chasing ghosts. With the cottage mine, I turned to the future. Coastal Code thrived thanks to Jenna's leadership during my recovery. We launched a new app, Tide Track, inspired by my hospital days, a tool for patients with mobility issues to communicate via eye movements. "It's personal," I told Clara over coffee, showing her the prototype. "It's for people like me, stuck but still here." She grinned, her eyes bright. "You're turning pain into purpose, Sarah. That's power." The project gave my accident meaning, a way to help others trapped in silence, just as I'd been. Lily and I kept our promise, taking small steps. She visited the cottage, bringing takeout from a Portland ramen shop, and we talked about Rachel, our childhood, and the parents we'd both lost in different ways. "I'm angry," she admitted one night, sitting on the porch swing. "At them, at myself for not seeing it." I touched her arm, the first real contact since our cafe meeting. "You see it now," I said. "That's enough for today." We found common ground in unexpected places. Our love for cheesy rom-coms, our shared grief for Grandma. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, a sisterhood we were choosing, not inheriting. The cottage became a haven, not just for me, but for the family I built. Jenna moved to Cannon Beach with her new girlfriend Mia, a chef who loved hosting. Clara joined us often, her cat stories making us laugh until our sides hurt. Lena, my physical therapist, became a friend, her encouragement carrying me beyond rehab. One summer evening, we gathered on the beach below the cottage, a bonfire crackling under a pink-streaked sky. Mia grilled salmon, Jenna strummed a guitar, and Lily challenged Clara to a sandcastle contest, their laughter mingling with the surf. I stood by the fire, a glass of cider in hand, watching them. My people, my home. "I'd like to say something," I called, my voice carrying over the waves. They turned, faces glowing in the firelight. "To family," I said, raising my glass. "Not by blood or law, but by choice, by showing up when it matters. To you." They echoed, "To family," their voices warm, their glasses clinking. Later, as the fire died down, Lily sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I looked at the ocean, its rhythm steady, like a heartbeat. "Yeah," I said, meaning it. "I am." That night, alone on the cottage porch, I sat in Grandma Margaret's wicker chair, a blanket over my knees. The stars were bright, the air cool with salt. I thought of the letter, its words now a memory, its work complete. It hadn't changed Karen and Thomas, but it had freed me, letting me build a life that didn't need their love. I thought of Rachel, my mother, whose spirit Grandma said I carried. I thought of Lily, my sister, finding her way back to me. And I thought of the family around that bonfire, their laughter a balm for wounds I'd carried too long. The accident had nearly taken me, but it had given me something greater: the truth. It showed me who stayed, who fought, and who saw me when I couldn't see myself. If you've ever felt unloved or unclaimed, know this: family isn't what you're born into. It's who chooses you, who stands by you when the world walks away. My story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's had to rewrite their ending, who's found strength in letting go. As the waves sang below, I closed my eyes, grateful for the path that led me here. To a cottage by the sea, to a family I chose, to a life that was, finally, mine.